Good morning. Once again, good to see everybody here. Today we're going to look at Psalm 131. Psalm 131. It's such a wonderful psalm. Talk about a picture of serenity, tranquility, quiet, and repose. Psalm 131 nails it. Really gives us a picture of what it means to be quiet and at rest in the presence of God. And so before we get into it, I would like to read it, and then we'll make some comment and explore the contents within it. Again, this is Psalm 131, starting in verse 1. O Yahweh, my heart is not exalted, and my eyes are not raised high, and I do not involve myself in great matters, or in matters too marvelous for me. Surely I have soothed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, wait for Yahweh from now until forever. Just a beautiful psalm. Again, given this serene picture of a child being held in the mother's arms and just enjoying the presence of the mother there. And this comes from, of course, David recognizing the fact that, he's not going to somehow try to exalt himself. He's not going to try to have everything figured out. He's not going to try to come up with some grand solutions to his problems. The psalmist here recognized that what he needed in his particular situation, and I would say what we need in all situations, was not knowledge. Knowledge is great. Knowledge is helpful. Definitely serves some purposes here in this life. But when it all comes down to it, we need something more than knowledge. And the psalmist understood this. What he needed was a soul that was soothed and a soul that was quieted. If ever the human race needed that, it needs it today, right? Especially coming out with the smoke still prevalent from the election and all the stress and the politics and the commercial ads and everything and all the ideas and the consternation and the fighting back and forth between people, it's just all the more a reminder of the importance of having a quieted soul, to have a peaceful mind, to be able to walk around just with a smile on your face when everyone else is wringing their hands and pulling out their hair, and just to be able to walk through life and the comfort and the peace in the presence of God. I think that's a testimony of believers. That's something that we can offer this world. That's something that would be attractive in this world where people are so stressed, so anxious, so fearful. To see people who actually have it all together, people who have confidence, walk with confidence and with peace in their hearts, that would be a great testimony to this world. But not just for that, but for our own mental health and our own serenity and our own goodness. We would need this as well. So let's explore this psalm and look at this wonderful, I almost said metaphor, but it's more like a simile that the psalmist uses here with this mother and the child. Again, he says, I'm not exalted. I'm not trying to figure out all these great matters, trying to, come up with a solution for all the different difficulties of life and everything like that. He says, I have soothed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. There's two individuals in this simile that the psalmist is using. The mother, of course, and the child. Pretty obvious, right? Think about the mother for a moment. How wonderful. Let me just back up. I don't think that there's anything more precious, more wonderful, more great than the presence of a mother. Especially for a small child. You could take a child to Disneyland, you could take them to to wherever else a child might want to go, to the park or whatever. But I tell you, a child really desires and longs for and cherishes the presence of its mother. Whether it's the biological mother or just a mother that's watching over that child as a guardian, children love to be in the presence of their mother. Just this morning, Delina had one baby with a bottle on one lap. She had another kid on the other lap, and the baby that I was holding was reaching out, trying to to get in her lap as well. There's something about being in your mother's presence, being within your mother's arms, that is a wonderful thing, a very precious thing. And I would say, it carries on even into adulthood. It's always a wonderful thing to be in the presence of your mother. It may not be her holding you or you sitting in her lap, but just being in her presence and being with her is a wonderful thing. It's one of the most wonderful gifts that God has given us, the presence of our mothers, whoever they may be. And this mother is seen as a mother who is just caring for this child, loving the child, and inviting the child into her presence. But then there's also the child itself. It's interesting here what he describes. We don't know a whole lot about this child except for the fact that the child is weaned. Now that's interesting. If you're reading this psalm, you might think, if I was writing this psalm, I would say, this is not a weaned child. This is a child, and by weaned we mean, a child that no longer takes the mother's milk anymore. This is a child who now eats other things, maybe baby food or solid food, depending on how old the child is. You might think, well, why does he use a weaned child for this analogy? Seems like a child who needs the mother's milk, that would be the better analogy, that the child, in desiring the milk from the mother, wants to be in the mother's arms so that its hungry body can then be satisfied. It's interesting that the psalmist says a weaned child with its mother. And I think there's some significance to that, and we'll explore more when we look at this from the spiritual standpoint. But suffice it to say that this child has transitioned. When an infant is very small and it hasn't been weaned yet, yes, I wouldn't go so far to say that the child doesn't enjoy the presence of the mother, but how does that baby view the mother? Just as a means by which I can get fed. I'm crying out, I want to be in the presence with the mother because I'm hungry, because I need something, because I have a problem and she can solve my problem. That's one of the main reasons why a newborn would want to be in the mother's presence. But a weaned child is a little bit different. A weaned child it no longer sees the mother as a direct source of food and nourishment, but as just someone that I desire the presence of, that I want to be with, not because I'm going to get anything out of her, because she's some way that I can satisfy a problem that I have, but I just want to be in her presence. That's all I want. Not asking anything of her, not trying to seek anything from her, but just abiding and resting in her presence. So I think this is a really good analogy that the psalmist is using, and that he's saying, I'm not wanting anything from the Lord. I'm not going to the Lord, saying, Lord, I have this problem. Give me the answer to my problem. Give me knowledge. Help me to understand what's going on. I'm not seeking anything out of God. I just want to be quieted. I've quieted my spirit. I've soothed my soul. And I just want to be in his presence. Not seeking anything from the Lord, just being with the Lord. And so I believe that this is a very appropriate analogy that the psalmist used. But when we think about it in the spiritual life, of course, we can see this also within our own context. When we think about the mother as signifying the presence of God, and we think about the weaned child as ourselves and quieting our soul in the presence of God, we can see a correlation, a parallel between what we experience with God and what this child might experience with the mother. Except for I would argue that as wonderful as the presence of the mother is, whether you're a child or an adult, however wonderful it is to be in the direct presence of your mother, how much better is it to be in the presence of God? Not to downplay mothers or, what a wonderful thing that they offer us, the comfort, the consolation, the protection, the care that they give us when we're in their presence. Not to downplay that or belittle that, but only to exalt the wonderful thing that we have in the presence of God. A mother's arms is just a temporary situation. And this is true whether you're talking about at that particular moment, on that particular day, or you're talking about in life in general, in the span of life. One thing that our small children that we're watching over haven't figured out yet is that mother can't hold you all day. Mother has to put you down because mother has other things to do. They don't understand that. they don't understand why they can't just be carried all day and be in the presence of the mother, whether she's washing dishes or she's doing laundry or whatever else, she's running errands or whatever. They don't understand why mom can't just carry me all day long, all the time, and never set me down. If it was up to them, their feet would never touch the ground. They'd always be in Delina's arms. And I think that's true of most children. But eventually mama has to set you down. And the same thing is true in the span of life as well. We all know that being in your mother's arms, being held by your mother, being in your mother's lap, that's a season of life that you go through when you're a small child. As you get older and you mature, eventually you get too big to be in mama's lap. You're too heavy for her. It would be a burden for you to get in her lap. And as you get to be a teenager, you may not even necessarily want to do that. I don't know. But that's a temporary season of life that you go in where you are in your mother's presence in that precious way. But then also we know death separates us from our mothers. And eventually, as time goes on, our mothers will be taken away and we can no longer even be in their presence in the general sense as we enjoy their presence, even as we become adults. And so the mother's presence is a temporary thing that we enjoy, a gift from God that we have as children and then going on into adulthood. But the presence of God is much different. The presence of God is with us all the time. God never sets us down and say, sorry, Joey, I got too many things to do today. Why don't you go over there and play with your toys while I go do bigger things? God is big enough. He's everywhere. He's present everywhere that we go. Whatever we do, He's always there, and He's always there to hold us in His arms. We can always abide in the presence of God, whether we're a small child, whether we're a teenager, whether we're an adult, whether we become an elderly person, all the time, wherever we're at, whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're going through, we can always enjoy the presence of God. So if for no other reason, abiding in the presence of God is better than abiding in the presence of the mother, because we know it will never end, even unto eternity past death. But it's also better too, because think about it. Think about who God is. We're talking about the creator of all things, the sustainer of all things, the sovereign God. There is no higher authority than God Himself. Higher than the governor, higher than the president, higher than the greatest king you can imagine, greater than the angels, greater than the cherubim, the seraphim, the living creatures, the highest being in all of creation, the sovereign Lord, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, invites us into His presence continually. We don't have to be like Esther and wait for Him to hold out the golden scepter so that we can approach Him. He's always got the golden scepter saying, come, abide in me, come, reside with me. All the time we can enjoy the presence of God. And He is a wonderful and great King that we can abide in. So why is it sometimes we don't abide in the presence of God? Why is it that we have trouble quieting our spirit and quieting our soul and soothing our soul in the presence of God? Well, it might very well be the case that we haven't been weaned yet. We're still that infant in our relationship with God, to where God to us is a means by which we get our problems solved. We go to Him because He's the solution to our problems. Our relationship with Him is more transactional than relational. In other words, I'm going to go to the Lord, I'm going to pray to Him, yes, but I'm going to ask Him for this and this and this and this, and I have this problem, Lord, solve this problem, and I have this person has this problem, solve that problem. And that's the extent of our relationship with God. Our prayers are simply just asking God for things all the time. Now, is it wrong even as you mature past that to ask for things? No, it's not wrong to do that. It's not wrong for a child even after it's weaned to ask for food from the mother, right? But eventually you get to the point, as you progress in your relationship with God, it goes beyond just seeing God for that. And that's all God is to you. Eventually you got to get to the point where you say, you know what? I don't even care about the world anymore. I don't even care if I have 3 cars in my garage. I don't care if my bank account is overflowing. I don't care if I have, the nicest clothes, or I have all these different things. All I want is the presence of God. I've been weaned from the world. I'm no longer seeking satisfaction and joy and pleasure from the world. Really, all I want to do is be held in God's arms and to abide in His presence. The the psalmist Asaph came to this point in his life in Psalm 73 because he was going through this weaning process in Psalm 73. If you look at it from that angle, you can kind of see it. In that, there Asaph, he's really perplexed. As a matter of fact, it says he almost stumbled. It almost caused him to lose faith a little bit when he recognized the fact that here he was serving God, he was faithful to God, he was doing what God wanted him to do, and then he looked at wicked people who were contrary to God, and they were blessed. They were living to a ripe old age, they were dying plump and rich and all these things, and Asaph saying, what's going on? I'm being faithful to the Lord, all I see is troubles, but these people are working contrary to God, and they have all these riches, and they have a long life, and all these different things. What's going on? And Asaph was really tripped up by that. But you know why he was tripped up? Because he hadn't been weaned yet. He was still thinking life was all about being plump, being rich, and having a long life. But then he comes to the point, he goes into the sanctuary of God, and he comes to himself. He says, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, I see now. The ultimate end of the rich is not good. And he came to the point where he said in verse 25 of Psalm 73, verse 25, starting in verse 25, whom have I in heaven but you? And besides you, I desire nothing on earth. See how he'd been weaned at that point? I desire nothing on earth. Verse 26, my flesh and my heart fell, but God is the rock of my heart and my portion forever. And by portion means that he's everything that he needs. Whenever you sit down to eat and they give you your portion of food, that's your meal. That's your full meal right there when they give you your portion. And to talk about God as your portion is to say that God is everything that I need in life. It's all right there in front of me on the platter. God's presence is all that I need, and that's all that I desire. At some point in our lives, and at somewhere along the journey of our relationship with God, we've got to get weaned. Again, not that we don't still ask God for things. He wants us to ask him for things. Definitely wants us to do that, but for our relationship to be all about that, something's not right. We need to enjoy the presence of God just for the sake of the presence of God. If we haven't got that first step, we're not gonna succeed in everything else. If we think our satisfaction is in the things of this world and what this world can offer, having everything lined out for us perfectly, we're never really going to truly enjoy God just for who he is in his person. We're always going to see him as a machine that we go to receive what we want. I'm just reminded of James 4 where he says, you ask, but you ask amiss because you're asking it so that you can spend it on your pleasures. That kind of thing. Just asking for God just because you want to live a worldly life. That's the wrong approach altogether. And so we need to be a weaned child. If we do that, if we can get to the point where we don't desire anything else but God, we're well on our way to having a quieted spirit. Our spirits are so noisy, our spirits are so loud, our soul is unsoothed because we've got too many desires. We think we need to chase the American dream. We've got what the world says is successful, and they have us doing all these different things when really we just need one single thing, and that is God. But the other thing that we need to do also is slow down. Slow down. Not to name any children specifically, but we have children that have a hard time slowing down. And having difficulty in slowing down, they have a very hard time resting in the mother's arms. It's hard to rest in your mother's arms when you're going after this toy and doing this and jumping off of this thing and running over here and doing this over there. But that's how our hearts are oftentimes, isn't it? We can't really rest and be quieted in the presence of God because we're just too hurried. We're too rushed. We're trying to do too much in too little time. We have to learn to really to slow down in life. And excuse me for getting really practical here, but I'm using this just as an example, but hopefully the principles apply in other areas. But I would say the typical way that we do things as Americans, and I've been guilty of this as well, and I'm trying to correct this in my life, but typically what we do is we stay up as late as we possibly can, watch TV, watch the news, and then maybe late TV or something like that, or stream something on some streaming platform or something. We stay up late, and then what we do is we set our alarms for as late as possible, to where we have it figured down to the minute of how long it takes us to get to work, how long it takes us to get ready, and we wake up and maybe even hit the snooze button to make us even more rushed. And we just wake up at the last minute. We're rushing around. We got the coffee pot going while we're putting on our clothes, and we're brushing our teeth, and we're rushing around. We got our eyes on our watch, making sure we get out the door on time. In a sweep, we go out the front door. We get in our car. We turn it on. We jet out of the driveway. And of course, when you're in a hurry, that's when every red light hits, right? You hit the red light, you're waiting, you're all ramped up because there's a red light, there's traffic, and you know you got to get there, but you're going to be late if that light doesn't change. Someone gets in front of you, you get mad at them for getting in front of you, and you're just rushing. Then you finally, you get to work, and then you rush into work, and then you sit down, you open up your computer, and there's a list of emails, of tasks that you got to do. Oh, I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. I got to rush to. That's the American way. Just rush. Always constantly going. Matter of fact, that gets me ramped up just saying it. Just giving that example. It's just stressful. How can we ever abide in the presence of God if we're just always constantly hyped up like that? We just can't. Just like the child can't really enjoy the presence of the mother, always running around, doing other things, we can't either if we're always rushed. There's got to be a different way, right? So we need to learn to slow down. And in using that analogy, I don't want you to just limit it to that, because it can be anything. I mean, it can be, sometimes I find myself rushing even when I don't even need to rush. I got plenty of time, but for some reason I think I need to get this done right away or something like that. We just need to slow down, whatever we're doing. When I was younger, there was a gentleman at the church that we were attending at the time that he was like that. Like he did everything slow. If you were working on something with him, as a youngster, I was just like, come on, let's hurry up. Let's get this done. And he would just methodically, do this, and then he would go about doing that and tinker with that. And now that I'm older, I say, I want to be more like that. I want to be able to just be calm. Do everything in its right time. You already got it mapped up in your head how you're going to do it, and just do it in its proper time. No need to rush. No need to try to get it done in an hour if you can get it done in 3 hours. Why not? Just take your time. Don't get stressed out about it. We just need to learn to slow down. When you slow down, you're opening up yourself for the presence of God to enter in. But when you rush, not so much. Let's see, what else? So we need to slow down. But we also need to be present where we are. Be where you are. I know that sounds weird, but you need to be where you are. And this kind of ties to being rushed, but it's more about just being aware of where you're at and being present where you are. Do you know where the presence of God is? It's present. His presence is present. It's in the present moment. His presence is not next week. His presence isn't last week. We experience the presence of God here and now, in this very second, in this very moment. This is where we enjoy the presence of God. But how can we ever enjoy the presence of God if our minds are always in the past, or our minds are always in the future? Or if our minds are always just wandering and just, going about its own pathway, its own way? We need to learn to be present. Let's go back to our analogy, okay? I'm going to show you another scenario. This is going to be a lot more calmer, okay? I promise. Okay, so this time, you say, you know what, I'm not going to follow the rat race anymore. I am going to go to bed early. And by the way, this is something I'm trying to put in my own practice, and it's working. That's why I'm sharing it with you. I'm going to go to bed early. Instead of waiting until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock. Or, your situation is different, but I'm going to go to bed early. Let's just say you have to be at work at 8 o'clock. Instead of waking up at 7:15, rushing out the door at 7:30, fighting traffic till you get there at 8, get up at 6 o'clock. You can do it because you went to bed earlier. You didn't waste all that time watching TV that's, doesn't really benefit you anyways. So you went to bed early. You wake up at 6 o'clock early, well rested. You get up, and then you're going to be mindful of where you're at. You're going to be present with where you are. Because you can do that, right? You're not rushing. You can be present where you are. And God's presence is in the present. So then you slowly walk into the coffee pot, if you're like me, and you fill up the coffee pot and you're listening to the water as it goes into the pot, and then you listen to the water flowing from the water pot into the actual coffee maker. You can even listen to the sound of the grounds as they're falling into the filter as you're making the coffee. And then as the coffee's percolating, you're just enjoying the sound of the percolating coffee in the coffee maker, and you're just enjoying what that sounds like. And then finally the coffee's made. It's wonderful, the coffee's made. And I can actually watch it be made or whatever. And then I can pull the coffee pot out, and then I can watch the coffee just pour into the cup. And the aroma of the coffee enters into my nostrils, and I can just breathe in how wonderful the coffee smells. And I say, you know what, I got plenty of time, let me just sit down in my recliner and enjoy the morning. So you go and you sit down in your recliner and you notice how comfortable the recliner is. Thank you, Lord, for how comfortable of a recliner I have, and for this wonderful house that I have. Protects me from the elements outside. And then you take that first sip of coffee, and you just take that in on your palate, and just tastes so good. You're sitting there thanking God for the coffee. You're thanking God for this beautiful morning. Thank you, God, that I'm alive. Thank you, God, that I'm here. Thank you, God, that I survived the night. And you're just sitting there enjoying that cup of coffee. Still got plenty of time. I can pray. I can read my Bible. I can do whatever. Just plenty of time. Again, I'm going to not leave at 7:30 to get to work, but I'm going to leave maybe at 7:15 or 7:10, so that if all the lights are red, fine, good. I got plenty of time. If traffic's bad, that's fine too, because I'm going to get there in plenty of time. For some reason, we think it's bad to get somewhere early. And I don't know why that is. At least that's how I am sometimes. I'm like, okay, I got to be there at 8, so it takes 15 minutes to get there, so I'll leave at 7:45. Well, then you're rushing the whole time and hoping you get there on time. But what if you get there early? What if you get to work 15 minutes early? Well, that would be pretty nice, wouldn't it? And you can just sit in your car maybe and just spend some more time in prayer. But all the time, even when you're driving, you're just being mindful of where you are. You're noticing the sunlight in the trees. You're noticing the beautiful grass on the sidewalk beside you. You're just enjoying it. Your eyes are open to what's going on around you, and you're just taking in the present moment. Doesn't that sound a lot different than the first scenario? I tell you, it's a lot easier to abide in the presence of God in that second scenario. But when our minds are constantly where we're trying to go instead of where we are, it almost becomes impossible. I would encourage us all just to be present. God's presence is in the present. And enjoy the present. When you're looking at your grandkids or you're looking at your kids, really look at them. Be present with them. This is a miracle in front of me that I'm looking at. This is a wonderful thing. This is God's creation. You're looking at a tree. God gives us these things to help us to be appreciative and have gratitude and to be present. And then the last thing that we'll talk about here this morning that relates to what we're talking with. So we need to not rush, right? We need to slow down. We also need to slow down. We need to be present where we are. But we also need to see God's presence everywhere. We know that God's presence is everywhere. The famous song for this is Psalm 139 and verse 7. Where it says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there." Verse 9, "If I lift up the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me." It's not just enough to slow down. It's not just enough to be present, but to see God's presence everywhere. This universe is saturated with the presence of God. It's enveloped with the presence of God. We want to be very careful. We don't want to get into pantheism where we say God is the universe, like God is this table or God is that chair. God is separate from his creation, but that doesn't mean he's not present in his creation everywhere. If you put me inside of a box, I'm not the box, but my presence is in the box. I am not these clothes, but these clothes, my presence is in these clothes, and these clothes express, in a sense, my presence as they move about with me and all those things. Just because God isn't the universe doesn't mean that when we see the things in the universe, we can't see him and sense him in everything that we see. This world is saturated with the presence of God. No matter where you go, no matter what you're looking at, you're seeing God's handiwork, and you can recognize as you're looking at those things that this thing is anointed with, saturated with, and within the confines of God's presence. Now, early on you might think that, well, that's only true when I'm staring at a sunrise, or I'm sitting and I'm gazing at the beautiful stars above, or I'm looking at a tree as it blows in the wind. Yeah, certainly we can see the presence of God in that, can't we? Because we see his handiwork in those things. But it's true no matter where you are. If you're in a cubicle at work, or you're in a concreted in room, do you think that God's presence isn't in man-made things? His presence is everywhere. Remember, the psalmist says there's nowhere you can go to flee from his presence. Everywhere that you go, whether you're in your car, whether you're in a closet somewhere, or you're out in a wilderness, on top of a mountain, wherever you're at, you're in the presence of God. And when you see things, of course, remember, this all is based on you've already slowed down, you're already present. Now you've been able to have your eyes open up to see the presence of God in the things that you are touching, in the things that you're hearing, in the things that you're seeing, in the things that you're smelling. God is everywhere. And when you get to the point where you see God everywhere, you're like that weaned child in the mother's arms. Everywhere that you go, you see God. Everything that you do, you're doing it in the presence of God. Everything becomes saturated by God, and you see God in it all. When you get to that point, now your soul can be quiet within, and your soul can be soothed. Why? Because you've narrowed down your desires to one desire. You've been weaned. You know that God is all that you need in life. You slow down because you're not so pressured to get all the things of the world. You can slow down. You can also be present where you are, and you can see God's presence where you are. When you get to that point, then you can say, why stress? Why get all anxious? Why get all worked up? I'm just living in the present moment, enjoying the presence of God, living for God, loving God, pouring out my heart before God, and all those things. Now you might notice that I left off prayer. Prayer is very, very important in connection to abiding in the presence of God. But there's a reason I did. I guess I'm kind of putting it in now, but I kind of left it off because I tell you, if you just slow down, if you just be present, and if you just see the presence of God everywhere, like what I was thinking is, people are just going to automatically pray. You're not going to have to try to pray. You're not going to have to force yourself to pray, or try to, clear out the mental mess so that you can get in the presence of God. You're already there. How can you look at everything and see the presence of God and not pray, not be thankful, not offer up prayers of gratitude, of worship and love and devotion to God? It's going to be everywhere. So let's be like the psalmist this morning. If you come off of a busy week, if you've come away from the chaos of the world this past week, and you're coming here and you're exhausted, you run the rat race and you're just tired, dog tired, find some encouragement from the psalmist. Say with the psalmist, surely I have soothed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with his mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. Calm your heart before God today. Find rest in his presence, and then abide there. Stay there. Don't let it go. So that's our lesson here this morning. If you're here this morning and you want to live your life in this way, you want to find finally something in my life to where I'm not constantly stressed and always trying to chase after the things of this world. There's something better for you. There's a rest in God that you can find. And it starts by having your relationship restored with him initially through the forgiveness of sins. And then it goes from there. But that's the first step. And I would encourage you to come to him. He's made the way by which you can have a relationship with him through his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ died for you so that you could be restored in a relationship with God. Will you receive that? Will you confess him as Lord of your life? Will you also repent of your sins? Say, I've messed up. I've done things that have interrupted this relationship, but now I want to turn back to God and fully give myself to that relationship. And do you want to be baptized? To walk in newness of life, to begin that new life with him. We'd encourage you to do that this morning as we stand and sing.